So welcome again, and we'll start off with our bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And we'll get right into it. So, so let's go on. Let's go on with Rashii. I think we should do. Continue.
Number 2.
Yeah, I think we did. We did it. It said Shabbat Lashem, and he explained that it is for God's sake.
Oh, yeah, we did.
For the sake of Hashem. Yes.
Number 3 has no Rashii.
Let's see where that is. There we are. Here we go. Sheish shanim tizra sadecha. For 6 years you shall sow your field. Hello? What is that? Okay. Wonderful. Oh well, little fun and games. And for 6 years, this is a special verb. Depending on the society, you find vocabulary for specialized kinds of things. So tizmor karmecha, a kerem is a vineyard, and tizmor, maybe we can explain it as prune your vineyard.
That's what it says here, yeah.
So,
which is interesting because it's the same shorish as zemer.
Yeah, right. I'm sure of that. Yes, I think that's true. It was a time for singing because there's joy. Remember, wine is a symbol of joy. That's why we make kiddush over wine on Shabbat, because it's a symbol of joy.
Yeah, but then you would expect the verb to be picking the grapes, wouldn't you? Or
I believe
pressing
that's what.
grapes.
Yeah, but I think that is what it means. I think
pruning. I think you read about pruning.
That's how they prune. That's how they translate it. But something. Come to think of it, I think that is what it means. In terms of how you cultivate grapes, that's the way you do it. In other words, you prune the vineyard in order to have new shoots coming out that will bear the grapes. So it has to do with tending them, because it has to parallel the tizra, right? That you sow your field with seed, but grapes are perennials, and that's what you do to increase the harvest.
And then it says to gather in the year, and then to gather in the food anyway. So
right.
I'll check with Professor Klein when I get a chance.
Yeah. Asafta et fuatcha, and you shall gather in its produce. So I don't want to take up the time looking at Jastro right now.
So here it just says prune.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uvashana hashvi'it, but just on that word, I believe it only refers to pruning grapevines. I don't think it's a verb that's used for another different kind of species or tree or something like that. Uvashana hashvi'it, and in the 7th year, Shabbat Shabbaton yeh la'aretz. There will be a complete rest for the land. Shabbat Lashem, and again, a Shabbat for Hashem. Sadcha lo tizra, you shall not sow your field. V'charimacha lo tizmor, nor shall you prune your vineyard. So, Yihiyeh la'aretz, shall be to the land. So he's saying what it really means is it's both, while it says the land, it means la sadot, for the fields, the lakramim, and for the vineyards. Lord, so the question that this might raise would be, if it specifies vineyards, does it include other fruit trees? Just to show that, when you start to pick this apart and look into it, questions start to rise. Lo tizmor. So here we go. He explains what zemer is. Shekotzetzim zmoroteha, that what it means is they lop off its shoots. The Targumo, and the Aramaic of this is lo tachsach, and I believe that has to do with cutting. Vedomelo, and it's similar. There's similar examples in Isaiah 33. Kotzim kesuchim, cut off thorns. And another example in Psalms 80, srufa be'esh kesucha. So burnt in the fire. And I think, again, it means sort of lopped off, something like that.
Yeah. Here for the Onkelos, it says tichsach.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you for the pointing out there.
Yeah, I had to use my glasses and my.
So here we go. It's fiach, next verse. It's fiach kirtzircha lo tiktzor. And the sfiach refers to the aftergrowth. And Rashii will explain that, right? Of your harvest, right? The aftergrowth of your harvest. Lo tiktzor, you shall not reap. Ve'et inve nazirecha, and again, it's talking about grapes. In anavim are grapes. Nazirecha. Here, Rashii explains what nazirecha is going to mean. Interestingly enough, the word nazir refers to a Nazirite, someone who stays away from any grape product whatsoever. Okay, but that's not what this is talking about. It has something to do with grapes that you've left alone or something like that. Rashii explains what this is. Lo tivtzor, it means, again, bitzira is the verb in Hebrew that is used for harvesting grapes. Shnat Shabbaton yeh la'aretz. It shall be a year of rest for the land. And just notice just how many times it talks about the land resting. So here we go. It's fiach ketzircha. So he says, the point about this is that even if you did not lo zarata, even if you didn't sow it, v'haya samcha min hazera, and if this is something that grew from the seed, shenafal ba, which fell be'et hakatzir, when the field was harvested. So I believe the English term for that is aftergrowth. In other words, you harvested the field in the 6th year, and seed fell out after your harvest, and in fact, it grew. Hu karui sviach. That is what is referred to as sviach. So you didn't seed, because it keeps saying you shall not sow your field, right? So this isn't produce that you personally sowed in your field. So we're taking care of that possible loophole. Lo tiktzor, you shall not harvest or reap. Liyot machzik bo, and he says what this means is to treat it k'sha'ar katzir, like other harvests. Ela hefker yeh lakol. And this is the real point of it all. Hefker means ownerless property. You shall treat this as ownerless property for anyone. So in other words, in every sense, what grows in that 7th year, it isn't yours. It is, you have to be willing to let anyone help themselves to any produce that is created by the field in that 7th year. Okay, so here we go. He explains this nazirecha. Shehin zarta, meaning you separated away. You separated it off, v'hifrashta, and you kept away b'nei adam mehem. In other words, maybe you stored them, something like that. v'lo hifkartam, and you did not make them available for everyone. So if you have grapes there in that 7th year, they now have to become everybody's. Lo tifsor, okay, you shall not harvest, right, or gather in, or tam, okay, so here we go. You cannot take from them, ein chabotzer, you should not harvest them from those grapes, ela min hamufkar, but you're only entitled to grapes that are open to everyone. Again, it's from this word hefker, which means you don't claim ownership to it. So it's interesting that there's a consideration in the Torah of exactly what we mean by ownership. And that is because if in fact we hold that there is a divine creator, if we believe that we in a being that created the universe, that there is something, then in a sense, we don't own anything. And these particular practice, or this specific practice, reinforces that idea. Because I think I saw a statement once in a Siddur, all we have and are is yours, meaning God's. So just reinforcing that idea, because if you think about it, a lot of the, I think a lot of the social ills of the world have to do with the nature of ownership, and that people feel they really own something, but the truth is we don't.
That is the way I have felt about my land for the last 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first time I ever owned anything, outright like that. Well, 20 years ago, I paid it off. And I just thought to myself, all of this time, all I am doing is taking care of this land, this home. And no wonder I'm Jewish. Look, and people tell me you are so Jewish. And what's happening when I'm studying all this stuff is I'm realizing how deeply embedded in me Jewish values are.
Cool. Go ahead.
But it says, okay, you can't harvest the grapes that you set aside for yourself, but you
Yes.
can take from the grapes that you have declared ownerless.
Right.
But since you're the one that declared them ownerless,
Mm-hmm.
and you know it before everybody else does, you can just declare them ownerless and take them.
Again, essentially what we're talking about is you would take as much as you would need for the meal that you're about to have. But the issue really is about taking them to market. So, presumably you have a lot of them, but you really, there are some sort of neat statements that I was reading about, that this isn't only to take care of the poor, it's also to take care of the wealthy, because no one has this kind of property at all. And what we're talking about here is simply being able to take your next meal. And again, this is so parallel in some ways to the manna, to what happened with the manna. Remember, because people wanted to take more initially to store up. And I think this is the way you're supposed to treat this. Again, not having done huge research on this particular halakha, but my understanding really is that you would take as much as you needed for your immediate needs.
And isn't it embodying these values? So, lack of better words, the honor system.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it does involve, hopefully this kind of behavior would tend to reinforce the honor system, you would hope. But again, in terms of ownership, it does have more to do with responsibility and not so much the sheer possession of something or the control. That it has more to do with the responsibility that goes along with it.
Awesome.
So there's, yeah, but I mean, it's still tough, right? I mean, having anyone come onto your property, every 7 years and not having any problem with people just, coming onto your land, that I think is a great act of faith and trust. So in that sense, there's ownership, you know.
Well, also in today's society, wouldn't that also, you know, extend to communal gardens and communal spaces where there is where there's ownership of, like, say, separate little plots, but then at certain times you just let it all be harvested.
So remember, these only apply to Israel. This particular law only applies to the land of Israel. But to try and answer your point, if it's communal, of course, it's already not individually owned, presumably. But I think I understand what you're saying, is that people have a community garden where each person, you know, has a part of the field or whatever to do it. Yeah, I mean, presumably, if that's what was going on here, I believe that what we're talking about here, of course, is we're talking about farmers, you know, who have to farm a much larger area, etc.
So are these 7 years counted from by individuals from when they plant things, or is it the same 7 years for everybody, like based on the calendar?
Right, I believe
it's same for everybody.
Yeah, it's based on the calendar. So if you take 5781, if that's the year we're in, and divide it by 7, and you get the remainder, whatever the remainder is the year of the next sabbatical cycle. And if there's no remainder, then you know it's a sabbatical year.
Wouldn't it be
that is the way they work it out.
But wouldn't it rotate with different people's land taking a sabbatical at a different time?
No. Everything became sabbatical at the same time. The sabbatical year applied to everyone.
Wow.
Still does.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's why I have to remind myself not to chase people away from my clementina tree next year.
So next year is a Shemitah year?
Yeah.
So
I mean, I've been trying to get in the habit of not chasing anybody away, but it has happened. One year in our old house, we had a bunch of fruit trees outside our garden, and there were apricots on one of them. Mm-hmm. And somebody came up and started picking them. Mm-hmm. And I yelled at him. I yelled at this guy that was picking our apricots. And then I realized, wait, I can't do that. It's the Shemitah year.
Yes, but he's only allowed to pick enough for his needs. Let's take a look at the next verse. It's not like he can take them to take to market. He's not allowed to. You know, the whole issue is, we know with fruit trees, they're so generous. The idea is that these fields and all this is actually a livelihood, provides you with a livelihood, that you take it to market and you sell it, and you know, and you get an income. I think somebody needs to mute.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was me. I had 2 comments. One is when the 7 years, and, you know, I think Lisa asked the question because of, you know, like crop rotation. This isn't about crop rotation, but it's more in line with the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of starvation. It reminded me of that 7.
Yes.
And then one of the questions you have about going to market is, in some sense, I don't know when market economies came in rather than subsistence. So I just raised that issue.
Okay.
So we may be reading into history what wasn't necessarily there on the ground.
Well, I know honestly that is the way the halakha treats this. This, you know, it does want to make a distinction between owning it and having. I mean, the farmer would still have tons and tons. I mean, the entire population, while a higher percentage may well have been agriculturally based, it doesn't mean everyone was. And the Torah does speak about walled cities. It does talk about towns. And one has to assume that there were occupations that people had, such as carpenters and potters and people who had other kinds of work that they did that were not agriculturally based. So they do.
But doesn't that come in later? Doesn't that come in with the Mishnah?
What are you referring to?
The crafts, like the name of a craftsman, like a sandlar or a. I don't know if that's actually in the Torah.
You know something? I don't know why, but there's something in my mind says something about a potter, but maybe not. I'd have to look. It's a very good point you're raising there. But the other pieces, though, they look at even Egypt. How early Egypt, they had artisans in Egypt. They had builders. There were people who were building.
Yeah, but that was a different culture. I mean,
But
maybe in the prophets, maybe in the time of the prophets, there were specialized craftsmen. But I have the feeling that in the Torah that you don't hear the word shuk, market, until you get to later books. Maybe in the prophets.
No, I think you're right. I don't think the word shuk is found here in the Bible that I'm aware of. I mean, I think that's a fairly educated guess. But nevertheless, I have to think that there was nevertheless artisans. There were people who had to, because it takes a certain level of expertise to be able to do these various things. So while it might not have been as developed as it is today, or even by the time of the Mishnah, nevertheless, I know that's the way at least the halacha is.
So I just looked it up.
Yes.
And this says, this is an investment journal, and it's talking about the history of the free market. But it says the oldest known media of exchange were agricultural, such as grain or cattle, or debts related to grain or cattle, likely as far back as 9,000 to 6,000 BC. It wasn't until around 1,000 BC that metallic coins were minted in China and Mesopotamia and became the first known example of a good that functioned only as money. So, and the market didn't have to be money oriented either. It could be barter and.
Okay, so the one thing I can say with absolute certainty is that in talking about the second tithe, they talk about taking it up to Jerusalem, and the Torah itself speaks about if the distance is too far, you can redeem and it talks about redeeming things for money, and it talks about kesef. It talks about Abraham buying the field, right? The cave of Machpelah, weighing out the silver. So whether we may not be talking about minted coins, but it does say tzarta ha-kesef, and that means the kesef would have a tzura on it. It would have a shape on it. So as far as money is concerned, that is definitely in the Torah. So I'm just saying how the tradition understands this particular halacha, that when you harvested your grain, the idea was, yes, you needed to have enough for your own needs, but it wasn't just for your own needs. And there's a lot of detail about taking it to market and that, but you're asking good questions about exactly when this developed. So
is there tithing in the Shemitah year?
No, they would not be tithing in the Shemitah year because it's ownerless.
Right.
You don't tithe ownerless property because it isn't yours to tithe. So no.
But that's only going to apply to farmers and people who are in agro, though.
Yes.
Right. I mean,
the rabbis might well have taken it a little bit further to allow people to tithe money and stuff like that. But that would be rabbinic.
So in Torah times, no.
I think in the biblical times, everybody was agricultural. Whatever else they might have been doing, they were growing their food too.
Well, you still had to take care of the animals.
Okay, but there still were cities, and if people lived in cities, they were not agricultural.
They made like plates and tools and things
Well,
like
this is
that.
my
You had
point. They
people
were
who were starting
artisans.
to,
Yeah.
right.
And
Right.
coins were made 650 years BCE.
650, that's
Yeah.
that's all.
According to several sources that I'm looking at, Britannica,
Mhm.
Wikipedia, usmint.gov.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Well,
They'll say the same thing.
the Torah is suggesting, believe me, in the Torah it talks about redeeming food for money.
So maybe, but maybe
Oh.
they're talking about pieces of silver.
Yes, the issue is this. If we're talking about coins, whatever coins they had would have had the value of the silver, right? Or the gold. So there were certainly gold pieces and things like that. It just, but my, you know, again, the idea of minting might be a more recent thing.
Yeah, minting was a few hundred years before, it said, before BCE.
Yeah.
But, you know, so a few hundred years after.
Right.
the
But
coins
having silver value, you know, the coin was, I guess we'd say, the bullion value of the metal. That's what you get the feeling of. It still was a method of exchange. They had moved away from the barter system here. Let me just, within the little time I have, let's go to this verse. V'haita, make sure I did the, okay. We'll go back tomorrow and do the Rashii on this. V'haita Shabbat haaretz lachem le'ochla. This is the point that I wanted to get to, right? That this year, the land resting, right, shall be to you to eat, for food, lacha, for you, ula avdecha, and your servant, ula amatecha, and your maidservant, v'lischircha, and for your hired hand, is what that sounds like. And this is what was also interested, ula toshavcha, hagarim imach. And toshavcha is understood to mean non-Israelites who are living with you, who are sojourning with you. So anyone living within the borders of the land of Israel could take advantage of this. And in other words, the fact that the property became ownerless and they could now have their food, you know, go to a field and pick up the food that they needed for their relatively immediate needs. So we'll pick it up here tomorrow. Just make sure, yeah, right here. Is this working? I'm not seeing an error. Here we go. There we are. All right, and I will. And I will stop the share for a second. Here we go. So we have a minute or two before we need to get going. Say that again.
Talents, Talents, according to Webster, is any of several ancient units of weight. A unit of value equal to a value of a talent of gold or silver.
Right.
But that doesn't give me any time period, but it does say ancient, so.
But I think in the course of the way we've developed our monetary system, right, there was a sense of the value of those particular metals, right? And
well,
there was a sense of an amount, right? I mean, we talk about the half shekel. There we are. We talked about it.
Right.
Remember the half shekel donation, the machatzit shekel. So
but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a coin. It might be just a weight.
It's not necessarily a minted coin, but nevertheless, it's
a weight, a weight of metal.
Yes, but it would be essentially a coin, function as a coin.
Well, a piece of metal which would not rot the way grain would rot.
Right. But again, so there would have had to been some concept of market value.
So it says that the talent was introduced in the 4th millennium BC.
Mhm.
and normalized at the end of the third millennium. And this is way before they considered anything to be called a coin.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, so they,
I'm saying it's
so
a
that's what we're
process.
talking about. It's not coinage. It's, yeah,
It's a precursor to a coin.
Correct.
right.
It's along the lines to getting away from barter. It's moving away from barter.
Right.
And so I'm interested as to when a shekel, and again, a shekel would be a weight, right? There was,
I'm guessing, yeah.
no, it is.
I
That is,
mean, it is, but I mean, at one point, but we don't know what it equaled. I don't
no,
think.
actually, there's a discussion in the Talmud of various amounts that it was equal to.
This
That there was,
is,
that it was standardized, but nevertheless, there were times when that standard changed. Yes.
Sure.
it says 6 kilograms. What is it? And a shekel weighed about 0.4 ounces or 11 grams.
Mhm.
Of what?
Of silver.
Silver? Okay.
I believe so. But yeah,
Okay.
okay, we'll
It's a lot
stop.
of silver.
I'm going to
Well,
stop the
silver.
recording. Thank you.
I don't know